Hey guys, tonight, we wake beneath a sky brushed with honey and peach, the rooftops of Persepolis, still cool to the touch, and the scent of warm flatbread curling like a whisper through the air. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the city is already murmuring with life cattle shifting in their stalls. Priests lighting fires in quiet rhythm, and somewhere in the palace kitchens, something delicious is starting to sizzle. You stretch blink into the golden light and realize you're about to eat like an Achaemenid. Except, let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this breakfast, not unless you're comfortable with pickled garlic fermented yogurt and waking up at dawn to chant hymns before chewing on barley. But hey, that's what makes it fun. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. You never know, you might be sharing a moment with someone across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the sound of sandals on stone. The floor is cool. The cushions beneath you still heavy with the scent of rosewater. The walls are painted with blue-glazed lions and curling vines, and a shaft of light cuts through the curtains like a blade. You're in Persepolis. Not the Persepolis of modern ruins, but the living one, stone, still polished, fires still burning, and breakfast still being prepared for king's courtiers and a few lucky servants. The air smells of smoke and honey. Somewhere nearby, dates are being mashed into a paste with walnuts and cardamom. Flatbread bakes on hot stones, thin, fragrant, and flecked with flour. A metal pot rattles gently over a brazier, releasing steam that smells unmistakably of fenugreek and lentils. And on a low tray beside the door, a dish of sheep's milk yogurt, thick and sour with a trail of saffron, spiraled across the top like a golden signature. You're up early, but so is everyone else. Persian mornings didn't drag. They started with structure. Workers rose before the sun to eat and report to duty. Priests offered prayers at fire temples. Nobles consulted scribes over pomegranate juice and slices of boiled egg. And throughout the empire, from the Zagros foothills to the shores of the Caspian Sea, people ate what the land and their station allowed. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Persian breakfasts varied by class, geography, and season, but they often began with flatbreads made of barley or wheat, paired with dairy products like yogurt or cheese, and sometimes small quantities of preserved fruits or seasoned stews. Simplicity was the base, abundance was the exception. But let's be real, if you're in Persepolis, you're getting the good stuff. Nobles started their mornings with food meant not just to nourish but to impress. They were empire builders after all. Their morning table might include honey-sweetened bread rolled with crushed almonds, pickled turnips, cucumbers soaked in vinegar and mint, or even tender bites of leftover lamb from last night's feast. You'd sip on a warm barley drink, something between a porridge and a tea, and if you were lucky, someone might bring in fresh melon slices chilled overnight in a well. Quirky detail. Some Persian cooks flavored early morning porridges with crushed rose petals, not for romance, for digestion. Apparently, rose made the belly less fiery, which sounds poetic until you remember it's breakfast and you're halfway through a bowl of sheep fat and lentil mash. But the real treat, the dates. Ancient Persians prized dates the way we prize pastries, chewy, rich, and endlessly adaptable. Stuffed with walnuts, sprinkled with sesame, or mashed with ghee, and rolled into balls, they were sweet fuel for long days. And sometimes, just for ceremony, they were dipped in crushed pistachio and served on silver trays carved with lions and wings. You walk past a courtyard where servants ladle yogurt into wide, shallow bowls. One of them adds a spoonful of something dark, maybe date molasses or pomegranate concentrate. Another sprinkles dried herbs across the top. Mint, dill, maybe thyme. It's impossible to know exactly what. Recipes weren't written down not for breakfast anyway. They were sung, passed from grandmother to daughter, from temple cook to caravan chef. Which, yes, means half of breakfast history is basically a really complicated game of culinary telephone. You reach a corner where two children sit on a woven mat, each tearing off hunks of still steaming bread and scooping up curds from a shared bowl. One of them drops a piece. The other gives a scowl that would terrify a satrap. And just like that, you're reminded even in a palace breakfast is messy. It's human. It's full of rituals and crumbs and tiny family squabbles over who got more olives. The olives, by the way, are marinated in brine and garlic, black, wrinkled, and sharp. They wake your tongue before your mind, and if you're lucky, there's a dish of fresh herbs nearby, not just for flavor, but for fortune. Eating basil, parsley, and green onion in the morning was thought to cleanse the spirit. Or maybe just your breath? Historians still argue whether the Achaemenids had a formalized breakfast culture in the way we think of it today. Some suggest that meals were often light and functional, eaten standing or shared communally before work began. Others point to royal records and reliefs showing elaborate food offerings even at dawn, suggesting a more ceremonious approach for the elite. But one thing's for sure, breakfast was rarely skipped. You move through another chamber. A scribe sits cross-legged with a bowl of what looks like lentil stew. He dips a bit of bread chews thoughtfully and scratches notes on a clay tablet. You peek over his shoulder. The symbols mean nothing to you, but the rhythm of the moment does. Quiet, nourishing, intentional. And as you step outside into the brightening morning with the sound of breakfast still echoing behind you, you realize this wasn't just a meal. It was an offering. You step down the worn stone path from the palace and let the morning buzz of the city wrap around you like a loose linen shawl. The market is beginning to stir, not quite bustling yet, but close. You pass stalls, still being unrolled donkeys, blinking lazily in the sun, and a group of farmers unloading bundles of herbs, tied with reeds. Somewhere nearby, someone's frying onions, and you catch the scent of turmeric riding on the breeze like gossip. Your feet carry you to the outer district, where breakfast isn't served on silver, but in clay bowls and calloused hands. You're about to see how the other 95% of the Persian Empire started their day, and spoiler alert, it doesn't involve gold-leafed pomegranates or date molasses drizzled just so. Instead, you find a woman tending a small fire outside her home, the kind built of sun-baked bricks, low to the ground, with goats sleeping like lumps of laundry in the corner. She stirs something thick and brown in a pot humming as she adds water from a goatskin flask. It's halim, an ancient dish, still eaten across Iran and beyond today. Think of it as slow-cooked, spiced porridge made from wheat lentils, maybe chickpeas and shredded meat if they're lucky. It's hearty, it's warm, it sticks to your ribs, and it smells like comfort wrapped in cumin. She hands you a bowl without a word. It's steaming. You dip a piece of old chewy flatbread in it and bite. It's gritty, soft-spiced, nutty, almost earthy, not delicate, but deeply alive. Like the land itself decided to make you breakfast. Mainstream historical fact. The average ancient Persian, especially in rural areas, ate a breakfast focused on sustaining energy for labor. Dishes like thick porridges, legumes, leftover stews, and simple flatbreads were common. Dairy was precious, but not rare goat's milk, yogurt, curds, and soft cheeses added protein and tang. The bread you're chewing on now, it's probably made from barley or hardy ancient wheat like emmer. Flat round baked directly on hot stones, sometimes dusted with ashes or dipped in salt water to make it last longer. It isn't fluffy, but it's honest. You can taste the morning in it. You glance up to see a child carefully slicing a dried fig into tiny wedges and offering them to his siblings like coins. Dried fruit was a staple, both treat and necessity. Figs, apricots, raisins, even small wild berries when they were in season. When you don't have refrigeration, You learn to preserve sweetness like it's a secret. Quirky detail. Some shepherds in the Zagros Mountains are still known to start their days with flatbread dipped in a mixture of crushed garlic vinegar and yogurt. It's not subtle, but it'll wake your soul and probably scare off every illness and friend within 10 feet. You take a seat beside a stone wall, chewing slowly, listening. The market is picking up now. Merchants call out in Old Persian, Elamite, Aramaic. This is an empire after all. And empires don't speak in one voice. They hum in harmony. The morning meal here might look simple, but it's touched by every corner of the empire. Spices from India, wheat from the Central Plains, fruits from river valleys to the south. A donkey brays. A girl carries a basket of eggs past you, balanced on her hip like it's nothing. You nod. She doesn't return the gesture. She's too focused. Breakfast isn't a pause in her world. It's a prelude. Historians still argue whether meals like this were always taken in the morning or more loosely spread across tasks. Some suggest ancient Persians didn't distinguish sharply between breakfast and other meals, just smaller dishes spaced by labor and light. Others point to ritual texts that hint at defined times for eating, often tethered to sunrise prayers or seasonal shifts. You move again, following your nose more than your curiosity. Down a narrow alley past a potter's stall, you catch the unmistakable aroma of fresh herbs, cilantro mint, and something musky like savory or wild oregano. A man sits cross-legged, carefully grinding them in a mortar with a flat stone pestle. He sprinkles the mash into a bowl of warm yogurt, adds a splash of something green, maybe pressed olive oil, maybe a fermented herb vinegar, and hands it to an old man with hands like driftwood. It's not fancy. It's medicine. And it's breakfast. This isn't just food. It's function. It cools the body, settles the stomach, invites alertness without needing caffeine. Though, fun fact, ancient Persians didn't have coffee. Not yet. But they did use brewed barley water or thin fermented drinks made from fruit or grains to start the day. Some even claim there were mild poppy infusions, but historians debate whether that was daily fare or ritual dosage. You sit near a bakery now. The oven glows from beneath a dome of stone, and the baker's apprentice slaps dough onto its inner wall, counting under his breath. 1, 2, 3. Flip. Steam pours out as he peels it free and lays it on a reed mat to cool. Each round is paper thin and bubbled like moon craters. You tear off a piece and marvel at how something this ancient still feels fresh. You notice, too, that breakfast is communal here. No individual plates, just shared bowls, torn bread, and passed ladles. You don't need to talk to belong. You just need to eat slowly and mean it. As the morning brightens, people begin to disperse. The smith walks to his forge. Children are herded toward lessons. The market warms to its full volume, and breakfast ends, not with a bell or a declaration, but with a shrug, a wiped mouth, and a quiet nod to the sun. You brush crumbs from your lap and rise. And as you walk through the narrow stone streets, one thought lingers like the smell of garlic and mint. They didn't call it the most important meal of the day. They just made it count. You drift back toward the center of town, the kind where voices bounce off domed rooftops and clay walls hold onto yesterday's heat like gossip. You're not hunting more food now, though the smell of honeyed dates is trying very hard to change your mind. You're following the thread of something subtler ceremony, because not every Persian breakfast was purely about filling your belly. Some were about aligning the soul. In a quiet courtyard shaded by fig trees, you catch the sound of murmuring voices. Men seated in loose circles, wrapped in saffron and russet robes. Hands cupped around small ceramic bowls. This is a fire temple complex, one of many scattered across the empire, and they're Zoroastrians, keepers of a faith that balanced fire and water light, and dark good thoughts and good actions. And yes, good food. You linger just outside the colonnade and watch a white-robed priest light a small flame in the center brazier. It flickers like a whisper. Nearby, someone pours goat's milk into shallow dishes. Someone else slices thin wedges of sour pomegranate. This isn't a feast. It's a fasting meal, a sacred breakfast, known as paiti dana in some later texts, where small quantities of pure blessed foods are consumed to realign the body and spirit at dawn. You're handed a piece of something dry and round like a cracker, made from barley and chickpea flour. You chew it slowly. It's plain, almost bitter, but it grounds you, makes you aware of every grain, every crunch. That's the point. Mainstream historical fact, Zoroastrian rituals often incorporated food offerings, especially at dawn. Fire temples maintained sacred hearths where specific foods like milk, ghee, grains, and fruits were offered to Ahura Mazda, the creator god, as thanks for life's daily renewal. Eating near these offerings was considered spiritually strengthening. There's no sermon here, just sunlight silence and the occasional soft chant. Someone plucks a sprig of basil and holds it to the flame, the smoke rising like a thread toward the sky. You inhale. It smells green, ancient, clean. There's a stillness to it that sticks with you, like the pause before your name is called in a crowd. Quirky detail. There's an old belief, possibly Zoroastrian, possibly folklore, that the first bite you eat after dawn should face east. Not to worship the sun exactly, but to align yourself with it. One monk reportedly once refused to eat for a full day because cloud cover made it unclear where east began. Historians still argue whether these practices were daily obligations for the faithful or reserved for specific holy days and priestly classes. But the point isn't frequency, it's intention. You weren't supposed to devour breakfast, you were supposed to notice it. The courtyard slowly empties, and the priest extinguishes the ceremonial flame with a pinch of fine sand. You take that as your cue to wander again. The city is fully alive now. Vendors shouting camels, groaning officials striding around in tall felt hats with scrolls under their arms. You duck down a quieter side street and find a woman sitting on a mat weaving a basket while a small kettle simmers beside her. She pours you a cup without asking. It's warm, cloudy, slightly tangy, probably barley water, or maybe a sour brew of tamarind and herbs. You sip, and something in it tastes like a memory you've never had. She tears a bit of fresh cheese and places it on a fig leaf, hands it to you with a soft grin. The cheese is cool and soft, like a milky sigh. The leaf has a faint peppery bite, and you realize breakfast here wasn't uniform. It was a spectrum, a conversation between hunger and tradition, geography and belief. Some mornings, it was sweet and fermented. Other days, flat and functional. Sometimes it came with fire, sometimes with prayer. You start to walk again through a garden where a boy with ink-stained fingers is copying verses into a wax tablet. He's nibbling on a handful of roasted chickpeas, casually dipping them into something salty, maybe dried yogurt powder, maybe just old-fashioned curiosity. You pass a stall where a woman is roasting wheat kernels on a wide bronze pan, stirring with a stick, while her daughter fans the flames. The kernels pop and crackle, and the smell is divine, somewhere between toasted bread and burnt sugar. She lets you taste a few. Crunchy, nutty, oddly addictive. Mainstream fact, roasted grains were a common portable snack throughout the empire, often eaten dry in the morning or mixed with yogurt or milk. Some may have been sweetened with grape syrup or crushed dates, an early ancestor of granola if you squint and forgive the lack of almonds. You laugh to yourself. Ancient Persian granola with a side of divine balance. In the back of a butcher's stall, someone is grinding dried lamb mixed with garlic and pomegranate seeds into small patties. These won't be eaten right away, but if you lived closer to the palace, you might see something like this on your table come breakfast. Warm, rich, gently spiced and layered over rice gruel or cracked wheat. You pass a stonemason crouched beside a mural, chiseling out a relief of Ahura Mazda, flanked by winged guardians. His breakfast is still sitting beside him. Half a boiled egg, some olives, a cup of yogurt already warming in the sun. And yes, it's all real. It wasn't all porridge and prayer. Sometimes it was as simple as olives and tea, as comforting as lentil mash scooped with fingers, as sweet as honey over split dates. But the Persian genius was making it all mean something. Each bite could be about survival, or celebration, or spirit. You sit for a moment in a stone alcove where the shadows are long and cool. The city hums around you. You're full, but not just with food, with something else. The sense that these breakfasts weren't just meals, they were invitations. And now that you've tasted the ritual, you're ready for something bolder. The royal kitchens are calling. You follow the scent before the sound. A rich aroma, savory, earthy, spiced with something you can't name but immediately want to chase. It leads you down a tiled corridor lined with bronze oil lamps and into the shadow of a palace that isn't trying to impress it, just is. You've arrived at the edge of a royal Achaemenid compound. Not Persepolis exactly, but something similar. Columns rise like petrified trees painted in patterns once blindingly bright. Now faded, they still whisper luxury, and tucked behind them, the royal kitchens. This isn't your average fireside gruel setup. No, this is breakfast for an empire. The cooks here aren't sweating over single pots. They're orchestrating symphonies of food, directing boys with firewood girls, carrying pitchers, guards waiting on platters that will be delivered to satraps, scribes, and maybe even the king himself. You're waved in by a tired-looking man with flour on his hands and saffron under his nails. He grins. Hungry you nod. Because who says no to royalty-grade breakfast? He hands you something odd, flat, glossy, golden brown. It crackles when you bite in. Lavash. But not just any lavash. This one's been kissed with ghee, brushed with date syrup, and dusted with crushed pistachios. Your teeth sink in, and history explodes like a pop song in your mouth. Mainstream historical fact: Persian royal kitchens were some of the most sophisticated in the ancient world. They weren't just feeding royalty, they were showcasing empire. Dishes reflected the best of every province under Persian control grains, from media dates from Babylonia, spices from India, and cheese from the highlands. You're handed a bowl next. Smooth, slightly thick, and dotted with bright pomegranate seeds. It's a yogurt soup called mast o kiyar, chilled and tart with cucumber shavings and wild herbs. You sip slowly. Somewhere in your mouth, your ancestors just started clapping. And yes, this is breakfast. Not the tired slap of toast and jam, but a curated ensemble of balance and brilliance. A slice of melon appears cold, sun-ripened, a wedge so perfect it deserves its own poem. Then dried mulberries dipped in honey and arranged like tiny suns on a flat dish. A stew made with lentils and crushed barley simmered overnight. More bread this time, thicker, chewy, stuffed with leeks and garlic. You pause to breathe, not just because you're full, but because this is clearly ritual disguised as indulgence. A steward strides past, announcing something in Old Persian. A servant adjusts a golden pitcher, and behind a screen, a high-ranking noble mutters about the day's business while dipping egg into a tomato-onion mixture that smells like the desert decided to become soup. You are very much in the company of power now. Quirky detail. Some scholars believe that in Achaemenid Persia, the king himself rarely ate alone. Even morning meals were part ceremony, part diplomacy. Sitting at the royal table, even for bread and milk, meant proximity to influence. One record mentions a governor who traveled 4 days just to take breakfast in the king's scent. You drift toward the edge of the courtyard where the fire pit crackles. A cook is roasting quails over charcoal, basting them in a glaze of tamarind and plum. These aren't for breakfast today, but they were once part of the royal morning, especially when early hunting parties returned successful. A different kind of egg and bacon. The steward catches your eye again and gestures toward a long table set under a pergola of woven branches. You sit. Not at the royal seat, obviously, but close enough to notice that even the clay cups here are etched with lions. Someone brings you a soft-boiled egg, cracked open and sprinkled with sumac and salt. You tear off a piece of lavish, scoop the yolk, and eat like a poet. Because honestly, the moment demands it. Historians still argue whether Persian breakfasts were this complex every day, or only reserved for nobles and festivals. But one thing's certain: the empire fed itself with meaning. Even a bowl of barley wasn't just calories. It was a statement of place, season, mood. You drink a small cup of rosewater tea, brewed with mint and poured over tiny orange peels. It cools your mouth and warms your ribs. Nearby, someone hums a melody about a falcon that forgot how to fly. You don't understand the words. You don't need to. Because here's what you're learning slowly and beautifully. Breakfast wasn't just about starting the day. It was about setting the tone. Your first bite defined your path. Your first flavor decided your spirit. The Persian elite knew this. They believed in beginning with beauty, and they made sure even their early meals reflected that belief. You watch a woman light a small clay lamp, not for cooking, for blessing. She places it on the edge of the breadboard and whispers a phrase you can't catch, but your ears remember the shape of it. Your breath follows its rhythm. You think of Alaric again, of the monk tracing spirals in silence. There's something similar here, a reverence for shape, a devotion to detail. Maybe that's the hidden ingredient in all this food. You finish your tea and rise slowly, nodding to the cook who first welcomed you. He grins again and says, "Come earlier next time. There's a porridge we only serve at dawn. It tastes like the moon." And you believe him, because if any civilization knew how to turn grain into magic, it was this one. You step out from the kitchen court into the broad palace walk, your satchel a little heavier now. Someone slipped a bundle of dried apricots into the side and your stomach blessedly full. But you're not done yet, because breakfast didn't just happen in temples and palaces. It happened in fields, in mountains, on the road. And that's where you're going next. You leave the royal walls behind, just as the sun finishes its lazy climb into the sky. The scent of ash and pomegranate still lingers in your hair. Your fingers are a little sticky from honeyed mulberries. Your thoughts, slower, rounder, like someone buttered your brain. You follow a path etched in dust. No mosaics here, just packed earth goat prints and wagon ruts. This is the road of the workers, the farmers, the mule handlers, the spice couriers who keep the empire fed while rarely tasting the feasts they support. You're heading toward the Zagros foothills now. Not for the view, though. The hills roll like velvet rugs tossed by a giant. But to find the most ancient breakfast of all, the one made by hands, calloused from planting barley before sunrise. Your first stop, a village market already halfway packed up. The merchants here don't linger. They sell at dawn, rest by noon, and nap like champions through the dry hours. You approach a small stall where a woman is folding cloth over little rounds of dough. She catches your eye. Hungry. You nod. It's becoming a theme. She gestures to a flat griddle balanced on a clay stove. She flips one of the discs, sprinkles a handful of crushed fennel. An onion inside, folds it again, and hands it over. It's warm, chewy, and slightly crisp around the edges. You bite, and there it is again. That mix of earth and spice, of effort and ease. Mainstream historical fact, rural breakfasts in ancient Persia were often shaped by what was nearby grains, dairy, herbs. Barley was the backbone of most meals. It was ground into flour, boiled into porridge, or kneaded into flatbreads cooked on hot stones. The goal was fuel, not flair, but flavor, always found its way in. You sit on a low stone wall beside the field, chewing slowly. A boy runs by with a wooden stick shaped like a crescent moon. A dog barks once, then flops back down into a pile of shade. Next to you, an older man slaps a sack of yogurt onto a bowl, then stirs it with a sprig of mint. He offers you a taste. You dip your bread. It's tart cold, slightly fizzy like milk that decided to become air. He chuckles. Keeps the sun out of your head. You believe him. Another vendor hands you a handful of dried sour cherries. You chew and wince tart enough to make your ears wiggle. Perfect. Someone else offers boiled wheat, soft and nutty, drizzled with pomegranate molasses. You're not sure if this is still breakfast or dessert, but you're not complaining either way. Quirky detail. In remote villages, shepherds were known to brew a kind of breakfast beer, a lightly fermented barley drink, flavored with thyme and salt. It was more porridge than pint, and people swore by it. Not for the buzz, though. It had a little but, because it soothed empty bellies and warmed cold mornings. You wander down a narrow path toward a field where women are harvesting chickpeas. They work quickly, their laughter sharp, as the sound of husks splitting. One of them offers you a roasted pod, still warm, still smoky from the fire. You pop it open. Inside, 2 tiny peas, golden and wrinkled. You nod in thanks. She grins. Best before the sun gets rude. You sit with them for a while, watching the rhythm of their hands, the way their headscarves billow in the breeze like sails on a grain sea. No royal court here. No silver platters. Just work. And pride. And the kind of breakfast you earn with blisters. You're handed a cup coarse clay cool in your hand. Inside, goat milk mixed with crushed dates and wild rose petals. The petals melt on your tongue. The milk is thick and sweet. This is not convenience food. This is patience food. Food that listens while you chew. Historians still argue whether rural diets in ancient Persia varied much between classes or regions. Some say there was clear division: rich ate saffron, poor ate barley. Others insist overlap was common, with peasants sharing in herbs and spices when available. One thing certain, no one went hungry alone. Food was shared, traded, offered, and offered it is. Someone passes you a bowl of lentils stewed in garlic and coriander. Another gives you a sliver of salted cheese wrapped in vine leaf. You're starting to wonder if this is breakfast, lunch, and dinner all in one. But that's the secret of peasant breakfasts. They didn't fit into neat schedules. They bent around work, around sun, around stories. Sometimes they lasted all morning. Sometimes they were scarfed between loading baskets and chasing goats. You rise slowly, full again, but not heavy. Nourished in a way that's not just digestion. It's deeper, more cellular. You walk through fields now where barley waves in rows like green fire. Bees hum near low flowers. A girl sings while carrying a basket on her head. You recognize the tune, though you've never heard it before. You pause at a stream to wash your hands. The water is shockingly cold. Deliciously so. You splash your face, drink deeply, and feel the pulse of everything ancient Persia knew about beginnings. Start slow. Start full. Start with care. Your path rises toward the hills again. Not to another village, but toward the nomads. Because while cities and fields had their morning rituals, the mountains, they told a different kind of story. And you're ready to hear it. The path curls upward, now worn into the hills, like a memory someone refused to forget. The soil turns stonier, the wind sharper, and the horizon wider. You pass a thicket of gnarled pines and follow the sound of sheep bells echoing through the ridges like distant laughter. By the time you reach the high pastures, the sun has warmed the air enough that your cloak feels unnecessary, but you keep it on anyway. Because the chill isn't gone. It's just waiting. You crest a hill and see them tents like domed shells draped in goat hair fabric darkened by weather and smoke. Smoke, in fact, curls lazily from one of the chimneys. And beneath it, all motion. A small encampment of herders preparing for a day you've stumbled into just in time for breakfast. They spot you right away. No one sneaks up on nomads. A boy with sharp eyes nods once and jogs off to tell someone you've arrived. You wait by a low stone pen where a few sleepy goats blink at you with ancient judgment. One of them sneezes. It feels personal. Then a woman approaches, wide-grinned, sharp cheekbones, hands scarred from rope and time. She doesn't speak right away, just studies you, then points at your feet. Bad shoes, she says. Come eat. You follow her into a tent that smells like wood smoke and milk and something gently sour. The space is low-ceilinged and cozy, lined with woven rugs and thick cushions. In the center, a fire crackles over a stone hearth. A copper kettle simmers just above the flames. Steam spirals upward like incense on a lazy day. Someone hands you a bowl, warm wooden, a little chipped. Inside, a thick, creamy mixture of barley and milk, topped with what looks like crushed walnuts and a drizzle of something golden. You stir, taste, and your eyebrows rise on instinct. It's slightly sweet, slightly tangy, and deeply satisfying. Like oatmeal and yogurt, had a brilliant savory baby. Mainstream historical fact, the nomadic tribes of ancient Persia, especially the Medes and later the Parthians, crafted breakfast from what moved with them: milk from their flocks, grains traded, or carried dried fruits and fermented dairy. Their food was practical, but rich with improvisation, seasoned with herbs gathered along seasonal routes. You sip from a second bowl, this one, with a darker brew. It's a tea made from mountain thyme and wild mint, boiled strong and poured hot. It bites a little, but leaves your throat refreshed. Outside, a teenage girl squats over a flat griddle placed atop stones. She flips dough with a metal hook, brushing it lightly with melted sheep's butter and scattering seeds across the top: Nigella sesame, maybe even poppy if you're lucky. You're handed a piece of this flatbread still steaming and shown how to roll it around soft cheese flecked with dill and garlic. It's messy. It's wonderful. You're definitely going to eat another one. Quirky detail. Some nomadic groups would churn butter during travel by hanging goatskin sacks from the sides of their camels or donkeys. As the animals walked, the milk inside would slosh and tumble until it separated, transforming motion into breakfast. Who needs electricity when you have livestock and a long commute? A man joins you, his hair wild with wind, his voice low and full of humor. He slices a fig in half and drops it into your porridge. For the blood, he says. You nod, deciding that's a good enough reason to eat anything. The sun creeps higher outside. A woman spins wool on a hand spindle foot, tapping in time. A boy plays a reed flute, its tune simple and clear, winding through the morning like a thread. You glance around the tent and notice something unexpected. On the wall, stitched into the fabric of the rug that hangs behind the bedding, is a familiar shape, a spiral. Not large, not obvious, but unmistakable. You blink, then smile. You're not surprised anymore. Historians still argue whether the Medes passed on more than language to the Persians, whether their mobile lifestyle influenced not just military tactics, but culinary habits that shaped rural Persia for centuries. One theory suggests that yogurt-based stews and flatbreads with aromatic herbs became staples of settled cuisine, thanks to nomadic taste buds. You lean back on a cushion and let your body relax. Around you, the camp starts to shift into its daily rhythm. Children bundle up for foraging trips. Dogs bark once, then settle again. Goats are herded toward new pastures. You finish your tea, lick a smear of honey from your thumb, and quietly marvel at how satisfying a nomadic breakfast can be, how it requires only flame patience and a willingness to improvise. Before you leave, you thank your host with a small gift, a seed wrapped in cloth. Not payment, not barter, just offering. She places it gently in a jar near the fire and says, "Good shape. May it grow like breath." You walk from the camp slowly, the landscape spreading again in endless waves of green and brown. The wind picks up a little. A hawk circles overhead. You pause, watch it spiral. Of course, you continue your descent, following no path but the one the sheep wore into the earth. Your next stop, a port. Because if grain and yogurt and milk ruled the inland hills, then by the sea. Breakfast smelled like cinnamon citrus and boats. The air changes long before you see the ocean. It becomes dense with salt, sharp with brine, thick enough that it coats the back of your throat, like a story you're not sure you're ready to tell. The ground softens too, less stone, more sand, scattered with tufts of sea-loving grass, and the occasional driftwood, bleached to the color of old bone. You crest one last ridge, and there it is. The sea. Not crashing or raging, just breathing. A slow, rhythmic pull that speaks in tides instead of words. Fishing boats dot the horizon like punctuation marks on a sentence the earth has been writing for thousands of years. And nestled along the bay below, a port city stirs to life. You walk its dusty lanes as the sky warms from coral to gold. Traders unbolt wooden shutters. Boys in loose tunics sweep sand from doorsteps with dry palm brooms. Somewhere a vendor shouts something that sounds like fresh olives, though your ears might be inventing. You follow your nose, always a good strategy when breakfast is involved. It leads you to a stall framed in reed mats and copper hooks, where fish curl on beds of crushed ice, and dates shine like polished amber. Behind the stall, a woman tosses chopped herbs into a clay pot. Steam rises with a scent that sends your stomach into joyful rebellion. Garlic, coriander, lime, and something slightly fishy in the best possible way. She waves you over with a flick of her wrist, points to a low bench. You sit, a bowl appears. Inside, a warm stew made from dried fish lentils and slices of citrus peel. There's a boiled egg in there too. Halved yolk, golden and firm, and sprigs of mint float like little green rafts. You dip a slice of bread into the broth, and your taste buds cheer. Mainstream historical fact, the coastal regions of ancient Persia, especially around the Persian Gulf, were culinary crossroads. Here, maritime trade brought not just goods, but flavors. Lemons from India, cinnamon from Sri Lanka, pepper from Arabia. Coastal breakfasts often leaned toward savory stews, eggs, herbs, and lightly fermented breads, served alongside strong herbal tea or tamarind drinks. You sip from a clay cup filled with something cold and dark. Tamarind water sweetened with honey and dusted with ground sumac. It hits like iced tea from another timeline, tart, refreshing, quietly addictive. Across the market square, a child cracks open a pomegranate on a stone, scattering seeds across the dust. Another boy promptly eats 5 in one go and grins like a king. You watch this from your bench and try not to look too sentimental. It doesn't work. Quirky detail. In some port cities, early Persian cooks used seaweed as a thickening agent in porridge. They'd mix it with barley or chickpea flour and cook it slow over a clay brazier until it thickened into a spreadable mash. Some versions included minced dried fish. Others, honey and fig, for a sweeter take. You catch the scent of just such a dish as you walk deeper into the port, where the air gets spicier, oilier, more layered. A side alley holds a bakery, churning out flat rounds speckled with black sesame and dried orange peel. You buy one break off a piece and share the rest with a cat who immediately adopts you. The cat's name is probably No, but you call him Patient. He follows you along the docks as you wander. Boats rock lazily. Men haul nets. Women scale fish and joke like professional bards. A spice merchant calls out names like Charms saffron asafoetida cumin for your cough, and you swear even the breeze smells faintly of turmeric. You pause near a warehouse, built from sun-bleached limestone. Its door is cracked just wide enough for sound to slip through. Inside, you hear singing. Low, harmonious, rhythmic. You peek in just enough to glimpse a group of laborers sitting in a circle sharing breakfast from a large copper tray. Flatbread torn into strips, soft cheese rolled with herbs, small bowls of olives and pickled lemon, and in the center, a sticky date pudding topped with crushed almonds and something that gleams like candied ginger. One of the men catches your eye and smiles. You don't enter. You don't need to. It's enough to witness, to feel the warmth. The way people here begin their day, not with rush, but with flavor, with pause. Historians still argue whether Persian ports borrowed their culinary traditions more from Arabia, India, or Africa. The truth, as always, is messier and tastier. Port cities are ingredient soup. They collect, they remix, they remember through flavor. You return to the seaside just as the sun clears the rooftops. Children play tag around empty crates. Someone shouting about missing shrimp. A gull steals half a fig and looks proud of it. And you. You sit with your feet in the surf, nibble the last of your orange peel bread, and reflect on the morning. Not just what you've eaten, but what you've joined. Because breakfast in ancient Persia wasn't just about fuel. It was about memory, about motion, about meeting the day with something warm in your belly and something older than language on your tongue. And now that you've tasted the coast, it's time to taste the court. Because yes, common folk had porridge and stew. But the palace? Oh, the palace had saffron eggs. The palace doesn't just rise. It arranges itself. Stone terraces curl like petals around a central courtyard. Columns climb like fluted tree trunks. Pools reflect the sky with such stillness, you wonder if they're mirrors commissioned by gods. And the scent. Oh, the scent catches you. Before you've even crossed the threshold, rosewater honey-grilled lamb and something mysteriously nutty, all drifting like a gentle tide through carved wooden doors. You walk softly now, not out of fear. There are no guards glaring, no swords unsheathed. It's respect. Reverence. Because if the port fed your body, the palace aims for your soul. Even the birds here seem to coo more politely. Inside the main hall, silence rules like a king with excellent taste. Walls painted with gardens and lions, cushions stacked in saffron and teal. Gold inlays catch the morning light, making it shimmer like a blessing. A scribe walks past with a tray of ink pots and a half-eaten fig. He nods to you, like this is normal. You follow the scent to the kitchen wing. And there, tucked behind a screen of delicate latticework, you find the nerve center of Persian breakfast at its most luxurious. First bread. But not just any bread. This is nan-e-barbary in its infancy. Thick, oval-shaped, basted with yogurt and egg before baking on the hot sides of a clay oven. You watch one cook flick water at the inner walls, then slap a dough disc against it. Steam hisses. The aroma makes your eyes flutter closed. Next eggs, but not scrambled, not fried, poached in saffron. Yes, you heard that right. Mainstream historical fact. Persian royalty were known to flavor their food with saffron, one of the most expensive spices on earth even back then. Saffron threads steeped in water gave dishes a golden hue and a distinct floral bite. It wasn't just seasoning. It was status draped in aroma. A cook lifts the lid off a wide copper pan. Inside eggs, poached gently in a broth laced with saffron rosewater and cardamom. The yolks are soft, but not runny. The whites, cloud-like. A servant brushes a final pinch of crushed dried rose petals on top, and your stomach plays a drum roll. You're handed a plate. You do not refuse. Beside the eggs, a small bowl of mast o kiar, a chilled yogurt dip with cucumber mint and raisins. Bright, creamy, cooling, and then comes the surprise. A sweet dish, almost a pudding, but firmer, made from wheat starch, honey and butter, topped with pistachios and edible flower petals. It's halva, but the breakfast version, lighter, silkier. Fragrant with orange blossom. You take a bite and reconsider your life choices, possibly also your religion. Someone sets down a carafe of liquid so dark it could be ink, not wine, not tea. This is an herbal infusion brewed with dried mulberries and a touch of sour grape syrup. You sip it. Your eyes widen. Your soul briefly considers writing a poem. Quirky detail. At the Achaemenid court meals, especially breakfasts, could be so elaborate that the satraps' provincial governors were required to send regular tribute in the form of exotic foodstuffs. There are records of Arabian incense, Indian pepper, Central Asian almonds, and even snow yes ice blocks carried from mountaintops being delivered for use in chilled drinks or desserts. As you eat, a musician plays a slow tune on a sitar, a kind of long-necked lute. The sound is gentle like rain on silk. It's probably not technically part of breakfast, but who's going to argue with royalty-level ambiance? A small dog wanders in tail wagging. He wears a collar with tiny bells. You give him the last bit of your bread. He approves of you instantly. Nearby, a young boy reads from a scroll about the lineage of kings. You pretend to listen, but honestly, you're too distracted by your second helping of poached eggs. Historians still argue whether the Persian court's daily meals, particularly breakfast, were ceremonial in nature or merely indulgent. Some scholars suggest these meals acted as semi-public performances of wealth and hospitality. Others believe they were spiritual, tied to Zoroastrian ideals of light purity and nourishment. You lean toward both, because here, even sunlight feels intentional. Even your napkin has embroidery. You slip out of the kitchen courtyard with a full belly and a head full of spice-laced dreams. A servant nods at you from the herb garden. He's watering rows of mint, thyme, hyssop, and basil with what appears to be a gold-handled dipper. Subtle. You help him lift a potted citrus tree just for the joy of saying you lifted something for the King of Kings. The pot is heavier than your dignity, and you almost trip. The servant laughs softly and hands you a dried apricot as a reward. You take it naturally. As you wander back toward the outer courtyards, you pass a wall decorated with tile work. The pattern, a spiral. Of course, it twirls in blues and golds lined in copper. At the center sits a tiny relief of a lion eating grapes. It makes no sense, and yet it feels right. You pause to rest in the shade of a columned alcove. There's a breeze now, soft, smelling of jasmine and flatbread and something ancient, something patient. You remember the halva, the eggs, the rose petals, and you realize something. The palace wasn't feeding you. It was reminding you of rhythm, of ritual, of how even the grandest day begins with food warmth and a slow sip of something brewed with care. Breakfast, after all, is the first story we tell ourselves each morning. And in Persia, that story began in gold. Later that day, long after the golden eggs and mint-laced yogurt have softened into memory, you leave the palace behind. You step through a narrow garden gate where cypress trees reach toward the sun in perfect balance, their shadows like calligraphy across the stone path. The city buzzes faintly in the distance, but here everything feels hushed, because you're not heading toward more splendor now. You're looking for the heart of the ordinary. You wind your way through a neighborhood made of sun-dried mud bricks and faded turquoise doors, where cats nap on windowsills and laundry flutters between rooftops like low-flying banners of daily life. This is where most people live. Farmers, weavers, artisans. No poets with golden ink, no philosophers sipping spiced tea while solving the universe's mysteries. Just people who rise early and eat whatever the season allows. You knock on a door. It creaks open. A middle-aged man with strong hands and laugh lines welcomes you in without question, like you're a cousin returning from a long journey. His wife waves from the kitchen, where she's flipping something on a round hot stone. Breakfast here is simpler, but no less sacred. First up, a kind of barley porridge simmered with goat milk and a touch of honey. The consistency is somewhere between oatmeal and soup, and it steams like comfort in a bowl. He offers it to you in a clay dish, topped with a few dried mulberries. You blow gently, then sip. It's nourishing, quiet, a bit nutty, and it tastes like history. Mainstream historical fact: while the upper classes in ancient Persia dined lavishly, the vast majority of Persians, especially during the Achaemenid and Sassanid periods, ate diets centered around grains, legumes, dairy, and seasonal fruits. Meat was a treat. Spices were sparse, but skill turned humble ingredients into something memorable. Your host adds a side dish, a spread made from mashed lentils, lemon juice, garlic, and crushed sesame seeds. It's earthy and bright, and scooped up with rough-edged wheat flatbread that he tears straight from a warm stack beside the fire. His daughter brings over tea, but not the leafy kind you're used to. This one is made from dried orange peel clove and crushed cardamom steeped in boiling water. It's dark amber in color and smells like the inside of a spice merchant's dream journal. You cradle the cup in both hands and sip slowly. Nearby, the family's grandmother sits, weaving a basket from reeds. Every so often, she hums a few bars of a lullaby you think you heard back in the mountains. It's like sound traveling in spirals. You reach for a bowl of fruit on the table. Small, sharp pomegranates, dates still warm from the sun, a fig so ripe it splits the moment you touch it. You eat one slowly. No need to rush. This isn't a royal banquet. It's a memory passed down in butter and steam. Quirky detail. In some rural parts of ancient Persia, it was customary to eat breakfast while seated on the floor, legs folded with food, laid out on a cloth, spread directly on the earth. Guests were offered the seat furthest from the door, not because it was more prestigious, but because it stayed warm longer in the morning chill. You find yourself leaning back on one hand, tracing lazy circles into the fabric beneath you. The young boy across the room notices and smiles. Then, without a word, he begins drawing matching spirals in the ash beside the hearth. His grandmother chuckles. That shape always comes back. You nod. You've seen it in palaces, shrines, salt roads, and dreams. And now on the floor of a modest home, scented with lentils and love. Historians still argue whether breakfast was considered a full meal in the classical Persian day, or more of a transitional ritual between sleep and work. Some sources suggest it was informal, even skipped altogether by laborers. Others point to texts describing early morning offerings, both domestic and ceremonial, hinting at the day's first nourishment as something inherently meaningful. You look around, and you'd argue it was sacred, just in smaller bowls. After the meal, you offer to help wash the dishes. They laugh at you gently, kindly, and shoo you toward the courtyard instead. There you sit beneath a fig tree. Bees buzz lazily. The sun warms the bricks. And somewhere nearby, someone is baking bread. You realize that your morning at the palace showed you one kind of richness. But this is the other kind. The kind measured not in gold or saffron, but in habit, in care, in how someone makes sure your tea is just the right temperature, even if they've only just met you. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you're no longer a traveler. You belong. You open them again to see the older woman from earlier, holding out something in a napkin. You take it and unfold. It's a thin sesame-studded biscuit sweetened with grape must, the kind you can eat in 2 bites or savor in 10. You go with 7. Balance matters. As you stand to leave, the man claps you on the back and says, "Come again when the grapes are ready." We make syrup that makes kings jealous. You promise you will, even if you don't know when. Because some breakfasts aren't just meals, they're invitations. And Persia knew how to invite the morning in with both hands open and a table set with whatever the earth offered. You walk back toward the city under the noon sun, breath sweet with cardamom eyes, still soft with steam and figs. And your heart. It feels full, not heavy, but full. Like a bowl that's been emptied and refilled 1,000 times and still welcomes more. You leave the village behind, just as the day begins to stretch and yawn its way toward afternoon. The shadows grow longer, softer, like silk scarves tossed across the path. You follow a dry stream bed now, winding gently through golden grass with the faint smell of crushed herbs on the wind. Somewhere ahead lies the end of the journey, or at least the next pause in it. But you're not thinking about endings. You're thinking about breakfast. Not because you're hungry again, though. Honestly, a few more of those sesame biscuits wouldn't hurt. But because you've started to understand it differently. What began as a simple curiosity, what did ancient Persians eat in the morning, has become something deeper, something slower, something sacred. You arrive at a small roadside rest stop, little more than a stone bench beneath an overhanging ledge. There's a traveler already there, tending a fire made of dried sagebrush. He's boiling something in a copper pot and humming a tune that turns and loops like a river doubling back on itself. He nods to you. Without words, you sit beside him. He hands you a cup. Inside is a warm spiced drink made of barley water and crushed dates. Not fancy, not filtered, but it tastes like roots and sun and memory. Mainstream historical fact, barley water was a common drink in ancient Persia, especially among the working class. It was often sweetened with honey or fruit, lightly fermented, or left to chill overnight as a restorative morning tonic. It wasn't just hydration, it was part of the rhythm of life. You sip slowly, and the fire crackles. The traveler speaks finally. "You've been to the old places," he says, almost as a statement. You nod. He smiles. "Then you've seen how the morning teaches." It takes you a second, but yes, that's exactly what breakfast in Persia was teaching. About rhythm, about preparation, about the blend of practicality and poetry that defined a people who could build aqueducts through mountains and still leave time to decorate their rice. You think of the palace of eggs dusted in saffron and bread puffed just so over coals. You think of the mountain herders sharing yogurt and herbs by firelight. You think of the farmers spooning lentils and porridge into clay bowls before the day's first harvest. You think of the figs, the mint, the nuts, the honey. And above all, you think of how none of them ate in silence. There was always song, or story, or laughter. Even the quietest meals had a hum. Because in Persia, breakfast wasn't just fuel. It was connection, a way of greeting the day, of honoring the sun, of feeding not just the body, but the world around you, the family, the stranger, the gods, the self, quirky detail. Some early Zoroastrian households offered a small portion of their breakfast to fire itself, placing it near the hearth as an act of gratitude, not because fire demanded it, but because it deserved it. It had kept them warm, baked their bread, boiled their barley. It had earned a taste. You watch the fire before you, now its little orange tongues flicking upward. You understand. Historians still argue whether ancient Persian breakfasts were structured or ad hoc, whether they followed a set menu or simply pulled from what was available. Some say there was ceremony, others insist it was informal and afterthought. But you've seen enough to know it was both. Because breakfast isn't about complexity. It's about consistency and care. You take the last sip of barley tea and let the cup warm your hands a little longer than necessary. The traveler stands. He nods once, then disappears down a trail you hadn't noticed until now. You rise too. Pack up your things and begin walking toward the horizon where the land shimmers with heat and something like a smile tugs at the corners of the world. And now, before we close, let's slow everything down. Gently, like steeping a handful of crushed herbs into warm water. Breathe in, long and soft. Let the scent of ancient kitchens drift through your mind. Picture a courtyard bathed in sun, a copper bowl glinting just so, a loaf of bread torn by hand, shared without hurry. Let your thoughts spiral out like steam, not to vanish, but to soften, to rest. You've traveled far tonight through palaces and pastures, across salt roads and saffron fields. You've sat beside kings and shepherds. You've tasted their mornings, heard their laughter, felt their rhythms. And now you sleep. Because the story doesn't end, it just quiets. The fire fades to embers. The fig trees sway. The spiral turns one loop deeper. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Maybe by now you've already drifted off to sleep, and if so, we hope this story brought you peace of mind and helped you rest a little easier. Deep sleep makes life better, and we're truly happy to be part of that. Until next time, sleep well. You've earned it.